So a lot of you guys are in life science, but not everybody. I'm Thibault. So I've been having my own lab for 5 years, and I typically review, I think, in the past year between 12 to 15 paper every year. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about what I know about peer review. I've never been an editor in a journal, so I'll have my point of view as both as somebody publishing papers, but also reviewing papers. I was just looking for image on the net, peer review, Google it, and look for images. That was one of the first cartoons. And I think a lot of people view the peer review or even the publication process as something that can be quite harsh. And I agree with some point of view of that, but I actually like to have a bit more optimistic sort of view of the peer review system, and I hope I will convey that through this talk. So rapidly, what I would like to do is to first introduce what is the peer review process from the time you're submitting your paper to when the paper is published, if it's accepted. I'll give some my point of view how to review a paper. Everybody will have a different point of view, so probably Kurt will present something a little different for that. Very briefly, because maybe I'll have to make it shorter, I just want to give a few examples of reports, people that have written, reviewing either paper from my lab or reports that I've written myself, and then maybe give a little bit of perspective towards the end. So you have your results, you put them in a manuscript, and you want to send that to a journal. You also need to put together a cover letter, and then when you submit the paper, actually you have to provide some additional information on the website of the journal. Now the cover letter is actually very important. It's probably even more important than the manuscript itself, because when you send that to the journal, there will be some staff that will be just reviewing just to make sure that you submitted everything that you're supposed to submit. And then an editor will look at the manuscript. And the editor will receive a lot of manuscript every day. So he doesn't have the time to read them. So he's going to look at the cover letter and he's going to say, is that something that we want to review? And then he's going to pass it. He's going to assign a proper editor from the editorial board. So each journal has its own editorial board, and you can find that information online. Then it depends. Some journals have editorial board where they take all these decisions in a board. Some other journal, it's the discretion of the assigned editor to take a decision. You'll be looking at the cover letter again and may or may not read the manuscript. And at that point, it will already take a decision whether that paper will be rejected from the journal or whether they're going to send it to review. And that really depends from journal to journal. There are some journals like Lancet where they typically reject about 90% of the papers. There are other journals like PLOS ONE where they accept all the submitted paper and send them for review. So there's very different models. And a lot of most of the journals typically reject about at least 50 to 60% of the manuscript that is sent to them. So now send it to review, and that's where the review process starts. And actually, in your cover letter and your online information, there is a couple of information that you add. You recommend an editor because you want somebody that is somewhat familiar to your field. You will also recommend some reviewers, typically people you think that they will receive your manuscript in a friendly manner. And you can also exclude a reviewer if you feel that these people will be in direct or are in direct conflict or competition with you and could benefit actually to actually see your data before other people. And so using that information, typically between 2 and 3 reviewers will be selected. Now, from my own experience, I would say typically, if you look at the journal citation impact, I think there is a correlation between the citation impact and the rigor of the process. So a journal like most of the nature journals, Journal of Biology, all these journals that have these high citation impact, typically they're quite serious about it. But if you go on the bottom of the list, and I don't want to name any journal there, but journals typically that have impact factors of 1 or 2, their review process or peer review process is a little bit more floppy. And it's just, if a journal wants to have a good citation impact, it has to do a good job at selecting good manuscripts. So they will put a lot of effort to make sure that this is done properly. In our field, and that's is not always true for all the different fields, the reviewer remain anonymous to the authors, as well to the other review. But the journal that, the authorship of the manuscript that you're reviewing. So we call that process single-blinded, because the author doesn't know who you are, but you know who is the author. And most not viewer but reviewer comments remain confidential, but that is changing, and we'll maybe briefly talk about that. So how an editor selects a reviewer? So it will be guided by the author recommendation, and typically will, I would say, maybe pick one reviewer that was recommended by the author. You don't want to pick up all the reviewer that the author select, because that will introduce a biased view. You need to avoid any conflict of interest, so you cannot pick somebody that is in the same institute. You cannot pick collaborators, so typically anybody that has collaborated in the past 5 years with the author should not be reviewing the paper. The idea is that these people might view too favorably the work from the author. And what is very important, you need to select reviewer based on their expertise. Okay, so and that's on the field itself or on the technique that is used on the paper. And that's the work of the editor. Okay, and you have to see okay, these people are using this very sort of a unique technique that they apply for that field. So they will have to pick reviewers that know about the technique and that can actually do the critique of the technique. But they also will have to have people in the field that can judge what is the significance of these data in the field. So very often you need to be able to pick reviewers with different expertise for a given paper. So the editor contacts the potential reviewer. He asks if you are willing to review. That's done by email. You provide typically the abstract and the author list for the manuscript. You say, I need the review within 2 weeks. You give that deadline. And you ask the reviewer if they accept, make sure that they don't have any conflict of interest. So normally the editor will be briefly looking into that, but they don't know, all the relation between everybody. So as a reviewer, you need to declare potential conflict. And if you turn down, if you're not able to review that paper, typically the editor will ask you to suggest other potential reviewer. And actually, for an editor, it's quite sometimes difficult to identify the right reviewer for a paper because they're not necessarily very familiar with the field. And I would say one of the main factors that can slow down the process is the editor, trying to find a reviewer, and some reviewers say, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy." Takes another week. You have to identify another reviewer, and that process can really slow down just the starting of the reviewing process for a paper. So when you send a manuscript and you're waiting for a month and so on, probably the first half of that month was just a process of finding a reviewer for the paper. This is just an example of what sort of email you will get. And if you accept to review the paper, you click on the link, and then now you have access to the manuscript. Okay, before you accept to review the manuscript, you don't have access to that. So you will write your review comments, and we'll come back to that, how to do that. You send it back to the assigned editor, and either the editor itself or within the editorial board will take a decision. And either simply reject the paper, just accept it. In most of the case, it's a sort of a maybe sort of answer. So already I would say when the editor accepts to send the paper for review, there is already a great chance that the paper somehow has a good chance to be accepted in the journal. So in this situation, in this maybe situation, is probably the majority. The author has to address the comments, either just by arguing or by adding some additional work, and then you resubmit the paper with a rebuttal letter where you address all the points of the reviewers, point. Okay, and then this is sent back to the editor, and the editor can just accept it without sending it back to the reviewer, or you can send it back to the